Ex Marquise, or rather my eternal friend, Miliardo Peacecraft. I'm delighted to hear that you've shown up in outer space. Oz is changing, and I've found that I'm sorely lacking in power. Romefeller's way, or rather the path that mankind is taking, is just too selfish. I never expected their increased power would result in abandoning the true heart of humans.
I used to believe that Oz's duties were not to take part in war, but to educate soldiers that had the heart to fight. But eventually, the battles can be fought without even needing humans. I'm a soldier. I chose of my own free will to resist that eventuality.
Miliardo, at the moment, I don't have the power to alter the path chosen by Romefeller. I'm just glad to speak with someone who understands me.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk, G versus Wing this season. I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill, and joining me this week, as every week this season, is the hardwood-floored...
I'm going to try and find ways to start voicing whatever absurd way you want to describe me now. Yeah. That's just our bit.
That sounds okay, then.
All right. Yeah. Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Scary VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk headquarters out in the world. How are you all doing today?
So, Bob, before we go into our weeks, I actually want to bring up some sad news, Bob.
What happened?
On the very day of the last time we recorded, November 18th, we lost one of our own. We lost Kirby Morrow died.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Famously, for our purposes, the voice of Troa, but looking at his Wikipedia page, he seems to have his hand in a little bit of everything.
Most people were sad that he'd passed because of his place as Moroku in the English dub of Inuyasha.
Yes, probably his most famous role, it looks like.
Yes.
But Micah would probably know him from various Stargate series. He was a fan of those as well. So unfortunately, he seems very young, about 47 years old. We're not quite sure yet what has ended his life, but his brother just sort of came out a few days after we recorded last and said that. So we just wanted to wish for his family, and we're sad to see sort of a great voice actor go. But other than that, Bob, how has your Thanksgiving week been?
My Thanksgiving week has not been bad. I lucked out this year. I didn't have to cook dinner for our house, even though we're in lockdown. My wife's mother brought us a fully catered meal, had us take a portion for us, and then brought some home for herself. We thought she was going to eat with us. Then she bailed. Well, she was afraid she was going to pass something on to Al.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Where Al has MS, she didn't want to risk it. Mm-hmm. So I just yesterday on Black Friday, at time of recording, I was the first of several games in the second day of Fuck Cancer Roll Dice 2020. It is a stream that helps to benefit the research and hopeful dissolving of cancer over the course of the human biome. It was also, as I ran this game, the day that I released my first personal TTRPG.
TTRPG?
Tabletop role-playing game.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the way that you discern it from having like people say RPG. Oh, like Final Fantasy, motherfucker. No, it is a system that I co-wrote. I've mentioned it on the podcast at least once or twice before now. Niche. I put out the first book that is effectively a flavor book, a source book, and it will be the first in a 5-part series. So if you wanted to find it, you could go onto itch.io and you could look up Project Henshin Heroes Volume 1 Prisma Paladins. And it is very similar to things that we've talked about on this show before, my love of Super Sentai and how that might apply to G Gundam and the like. I had you go through the system that we did, but with this as the premise, and we have a bunch of art that I commissioned. We have a nice layout that we're slowly developing. Right now it's at a 0.5 as opposed to the full release. So if you go and search it at this time of recording, it hopefully by now will be at full release. But if you happen to find your way to it, and I haven't done the full release, I have it set for a $5 bare minimum. When I get it to full release, it is going to be $15 to help me coop the costs for the commissions.
All right. Well, that sounds pretty exciting there. Glad you're being productive.
Very last thing. I did put in money for a series of courses that should be helping me to further develop my voice acting skills. But with that, I will end and say, how about you, Skeyhill? How was your Thanksgiving week?
Yeah, a lot of, it's the downswing for a lot of people in Thanksgiving. I had some time to do some courses of my own, learning some more Unreal things, playing with the sequencer in there and playing with some of these mocapping kind of tutorials, these virtual camera mocap sort of systems. Putting together some shot plans for the pilot coming up in the winter. For my own personal animation project, brought on a costumer just yesterday. So,
really?
Yep, keeping very busy. Yeah, costume designing, production designer is sort of my weakest area. So I always try to make sure that those positions are on set just to sort of relieve some stress from me and make sure somebody's keeping an eye on that.
Between you and Patrick McGowan and so many other people that you have running around the table, it's hard to believe that you have a whole lot on your plate. Oh, wait.
Well, it's not even, it's just like an eye for it. Like, I just don't have an eye. These are things I just don't notice very well. So I want to make sure they are being tended to. So finding those people, very important to do. Well, all right. So G Gundam, Gundam Wing, episode 22 this week. Bob, why don't you kick us off with G Gundam?
Certainly. Episode 22, Breakthrough, Warriors' Strong Ties, or in Japanese, Senshi no Kizuna, Debru Hoi mo Otopa. Its direct translation, I did pull this up, is warrior bonds break through the Devil's Siege. Being attacked by several Gundam heads, the Shuffle Alliance and crew retreat. The Shuffle Alliance members decide to fight the Death Army in order to give Rain and Domon time to fix the Shining Gundam, which was heavily damaged by Master Asia. Schwarzbruder has a plan and takes a signal flare and places it into a river. He then disappears. The Death Army attacks and is repelled by the Shuffle Alliance. After some time, Master Asia decides he should make a personal appearance, so he heads into the battle with his Master Gundam. He notices the flare Schwartz put in the river and destroys it. Schwartz sees this and attacks the waterfall. The resulting gush of water drowns the Death Army, as they are not amphibious. This gives the Shuffle Alliance time to escape. Domon decides to stay back and confront Master Asia, and he entrusts Rain to the Neo-Russia support crew.
Really getting the nitty-gritty in these synopses.
Well, the further we get in, I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, wait till next week. Next week is a whopper.
Okay. Well, over here in episode 22 of New Bubble Report, Gundam Wing, we have the fight for independence. And in Japanese, we have Dokuritsu o Meguru Tatakai. Any of that sound familiar to you?
So I did recognize one of those words before doing a little Google translation. Tatakai is fight. We've heard it a lot of times, at least on my side where I'm listening to it in Japanese. But it seemed a little off, so I dug deeper. Dokuritsu is independence, but Megaru, it's not like a Japanese loan word for mega or anything like that. That would be preposterous. It actually means turn over.
Oh, I like that.
So the true translation of that should be the fight to turn over for independence or something to that effect.
Okay. I kind of buy that. That sounds great.
Yeah.
So in this episode, Zex, now donning the name Miliardo Peacecraft, meets with Lady Yun as the ambassador of the Sank Kingdom. When Nickel begins acting on his own, though, Treize asks for Zek's help in rescuing Lady Yun, who's developed a split personality while trying to execute his dreams. She imprisons Nicole upon her return to Barge. Meanwhile, Wu Fei gets captured by Chief Engineer Tubarov of the Romerfeller Foundation.
For those listeners, we had initially hoped to record this well before the holiday break, and there were some hiccups on both sides. So we ended up watching these episodes a week before we recorded. So bear with me if I have a few questions of my own to my own damn show.
That's okay. Well, I think the first thing that stood out to me in episode 22 of G Gundam was the America guy thinking that the explosions were awesome. Do you?
Well, of course.
Do you like America and China? They're just there like sweet. And everybody else is like, all right, hold on, guys, let's relax.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, big flashy bing boom. Yeah. It's the 90s, all right.
You know, there is sort of like this this idea going around. This famous trope called like Mexicans love Speedy Gonzales. And it's this idea that like each country kind of likes or takes like ownership over their like racial stereotypes as they pop up in shows. Like we're like sort of okay, like acknowledging it and kind of winking at it and laughing at it. And like
I think if you do it with tact, that you can take it in stride. I think that's the difference, you know?
Yeah, so I find it amusing that this America guy is like totally for explosions. Like I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm into that.
Remember, this was initially made in like 94, 95. It makes me think of like The Last Action Hero, a film that had come out around the same time that was literally just about the idea of action spectacle.
Yeah.
It is not far-fetched to think, oh, hey, America loves big, flashy things. And the only thing keeping Chibbity Crockett from being the most absurd American stereotype is he is not in a Stars and Stripes leotard. He is not swilling down Budweiser every 5 seconds or using some sort of absurd Japanese Southern American hybrid accent. Like that is the lot of it.
Yeah,
you know?
I wish he were dressed or I wish he acted like Daedrich Bader's character in Napoleon Dynamite.
Yes. Oh, and I'm so glad you remember that, man. He does not get enough credit.
I love that guy. I would cast him any chance I got. I look forward to the day when I can.
Let me play against him in a voice role, please.
Yeah,
his vocal quality is phenomenal. Continuing on, America.
Great. Rain, once again, being our Greek chorus, being like, it's so weird that you all are rivals, but you're all teaming up to do this. How wonderful. Except for you, Domo, and you're being the most stubborn.
Yeah, well, she is a Greek chorus, but she's also like our linchpin to see his evolution in that she is the love interest, but is also like the best friend. Which was a very common trope, especially in the 90s. We had this love affair in the 90s of we've been friends since we were kids, and now I want to be your lover. Like, that was a thing.
Yeah, they're like, hey, after this, you know, it's our Gundam, so I'm going to go wherever you go. And I'm like, it's pretty early to put this in the show.
You're dying, so bye, hon. I'm going to try to not die against my master. Bye.
This episode has, like, a song sequence. You remember that?
There is a musical sequence. I'm trying to remember where it lies, though. Was it during the prep up before?
No.
It was while they were showing Domon and Rain doing their building thing while they were doing prep, yeah?
It's a little bit there. It goes into their battle. It's all pretty much before the trap gets set. It's like, it's like, we're doing it. We're saving the day. We're beating up dudes. Is this like putting a song to like this kind of prep sequence, battle sequences kind of normal in this genre?
It depends. So one big thing that I don't know has stood the same amount of time is it is not uncommon for a series to have a soundtrack that they develop with the intent of release. G Gundam did such a thing, and there are a variety of songs that are both just the instrumentals that we hear throughout the series, but also some insert songs. Sometimes those insert songs are never to be heard on air and only come inside the packaging, and sometimes they're there to help boost the celebrity of an individual or two. So I didn't do any research before coming in on this. My presumption would be that that was whoever Rain's voice actress was probably trying to get a boost. She may have been a wannabe idol or just trying to make sure that her repertoire was being shown in her resume.
Mm-hmm.
It's not far-fetched. And I mean, every series in not even just in like a tokusatsu-esque version, but in total, prior used to have insert songs that would find their way in. Okay. You know, just alternative songs that don't make it to being a theme, but might be a theme for a character or a particular sequence.
And it's part of this merchandise sort of packaging.
Exactly. We're in capitalist 80s and 90s, so we're talking like this is just as the bubble economy in Japan is going to start popping.
Okay.
This is around the same time that America is hard capitalist. That's where we get our greasy exec time coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also going to note that we're in the age of the montage. Right. During the montage, you don't just have a simple music piece. You have a song. You know, it's not just a score. You have to have some kind of lyric behind it, and whether or not it pertains to the story, who heckin' knows?
Yeah, very montage. I actually was just like, oh, these aren't even like real. You know, the animation budget ran up against it or something because no real sort of actual battling is happening. And I'm just thinking like, I just want to get to the tournament.
Yeah, but they're tantalizing you. That's the point.
I did tantalize with this thing I'm not interested in. I'm not tantalized. I'm just like, let's keep going. Come on.
Well, that's because you and I are looking at different story aspects. For you want to have more of the intellectual, interactive aspect of these characters, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, look, listen, this isn't even a philosophical point. Just on pure directing.
It's not even that.
No, listen, on pure directing, we're not really seeing fighting happening. It's,
correct.
It's barely here.
We are seeing the build up to a big moment for Domon.
Well, you're seeing poses. You're seeing poses. It's like action poses, and it's like you're focusing on them, and they're like, and it looks like they're fighting something, but nobody's around them. Like you put it on a poster.
Oh, I understand what you mean. This is not uncommon for, at least to my understanding, a number of action anime, where you're trying to create this still moment where it's getting the essence of what they're going through. You can look at it from a purely visual perspective and be like, why am I just seeing the cells? And I get that. I do. But from the language that I understand, they're trying to convey this idea that they're in the middle of a fight, and rather than show us a bunch of repetitive moves or unnecessary over-the-top action that they can't really budget for if they're going to do the bigger stuff later.
Yeah.
They give us the essence of that by having the I always mess this up because my brain always tries to say emotes, but it's efforts. Mm-hmm. You hear the voice actors do efforts, which still convey the fact that they are in the middle of a battle, and you have them in a very simplistic stance that you would see conveying their style, their emotion in that moment, and you press on. That way you don't have to have reused cells, reused cycles. I don't want to see the same fight against Zaku where it's just wave, refilling and one gets knocked away, one gets knocked away. This is not 1972 anymore, you know?
I mean, but it kind of feels like it because we're instead of reusing cells, we're just not animating it. So we've just found a different tactic that has the same issue.
Do you enjoy in film watching a full action sequence? Yes?
No. Well, listen, okay, because we've talked about, like, I sort of tune out for those things.
Sure.
But if I'm picking between, I don't know, the film being like, hey, perhaps action's going on here, versus seeing it, I probably would rather see it.
So I try to think of this as more like when you do... I know it's a longer form thing, and it is not a time where we've gotten really into the idea of quick cuts in animation.
Yeah.
Where we just have flash. But I think that's the essence of what they're trying to get to here. And whether or not you like it, that's fine. I'm not going to try and beat a dead horse here. I've got plenty of horses that I need to beat as we go along this story. But
I mean, overall it's fine. I think the fight scenes have been fine in this film. This was just a moment where they just didn't want to give us that visual to help us along.
Sure.
And that was a moment where I'm like, ugh. I imagine we'll get it, you know, whatever happens next, because it looks like Domon and Master Asia are going to have a big fight. I don't think they'd cheat us there. And here, It was sort of a lot of like buying time to get us there. Not just in the world of the story, but the animators are like, okay, that's the episode where we're doing the fight. So this episode is just killing time. So here we go. Let's go.
But Domon realizes what's going on as this is happening and is like, Yeah, I promised, but I lied. Fuck you guys. I'm gonna show my math. He's been too much of a problem now, so I'm trying to do what I think is right and stand up against him. I'm not fully trained yet, and I would say next episode we're going to get the final part of the training that he needs in order to actually successfully activate super mode as needed.
Yeah, it feels like if you were going to finish up some training before this tournament, that would be a good place to do it.
And I mean, I think of Dragon Ball and other series where you always have your primary protagonist run the clock to the last second.
I know.
You know? We know it's going to be the trope that's applied, but we still want to see how tight that timeline gets. Is it 1 minute before they call? Yeah. Is it that they give him an extra 5-minute buffer? Is it that he has to do all this rigmarole and then have it explode in the air while he does a sick flip and lands right in the middle of everything with all his robot falling down on the crowd? Who knows? I don't.
Yeah, we do not. So speaking of the German guy, does he spin his arm so fast that he becomes a helicopter?
His robot does, yeah.
But then because the robot's based on him, he has to spin his own arms so quickly so that the Gundam will do it, right?
Well, it's sort of like when you think of how a video game works nowadays with these axis controls that are recognized by your system, whether that's your PS4 and the little PS Go whatevers, your Wiis, your Switches. You do motions, and eventually the system recognizes that motion is code for do this thing that you can't physically do with your body. If I shake my two Joy-Cons for my Switch a bunch of times, it goes from doing a simple motion to a motion that I would never be able to do with my human body. So, yeah, he does the spinning thing, but he does it at a different rate than what his machine can apparently do, and this is something that he has built into his Gundam Spiegel.
So this is interesting. Do the Gundam pilots make their own Gundams, or are they made by the nation?
They're made by the nation. They are maintained by a crew, but as far as we've seen, there is no crew that is with Schwartz. And so because of that, one presumes that he is maintaining his own machine. So whether or not that was preset in the original, or if it is a modification that was made after leaving Neo Germany, we don't know. But we do know that it is an ability that the machine has. It's the same reason why we don't see the fiery lines coming on Domon's hand. We see a facsimile by the aura that goes around it or whatever. And we know that he doesn't shoot literal bullets from his head. He just wheels them with whatever motions he has to with the feedback from his suit. You know?
Yes.
It's the same idea. It's just this one is a lot more physical than we've seen in other situations, right?
Yep.
That's my realism for this series that has Hadoukens.
But overall, just an okay. The other episodes sort of set up some things. Seemingly the next episode will finish some things. This is kind of like the glue to get us there. So fine. Yeah,
this is definitely the interstitial part of the arc there. We go from where we were as we were going into second act, and you could say that this is all part of that same act, but I also like to think of it as our transitioning point between the major story aspects. We have the prologue in the first 5 or so episodes, that whole space after that 5th episode or so, up to just before we go to the Guiana Highlands. I would say that whole thing is Act 1. This Guiana Highlands space is definitely a glue point, and I'm going to say that after next episode, we're going to see our Act 2, based on my belief of the story beats.
For me, I already think we're in Act 2, and I think next episode or the episode after is what is called sort of the high point, which is the midway through Act 2, which sort of, looking at the episode count, kind of makes sense. And generally what happens here is like a big victory or ordeal happens. And so whether or not he finally defeats Master Asia, whatever, it's sort of not relevant because he's probably going to learn how to use his special technique. And that's like his big victory, and that will kind of propel him through the rest of the second act and into the third act as things get more and more out of hand.
Now, forgive me, I don't have the entire monomyth memorized. I am not in the same place as you, but is this seizing the sword?
Yeah. Yep, I could call it that. It's also sometimes referred to as like meeting the goddess. The ordeal's kind of the more Hollywood term of it now. False high, false low is sort of popular now in TV terms. Like it looks like the character wins, and he wins a battle, but like it only gets him what he wants. But because he still doesn't have what he needs, like bad shit still kind of keeps happening, and he's not done with his journey yet.
Sure. I mean, the refusal of the call has been this entire time since he has gotten to see the other 4 parts of his Shuffle Alliance, right?
Well, I think the refusal for the call, I would, it's a broad term, and he's a reluctant protagonist sort of throughout. But for me, it's sort of like not wanting to fight his master, like not wanting to do the fight with his master way back in Tokyo. Like that was his refusal of the call. That was his ushering into Act 2. And once he begins that battle with the master, that's kind of where he transitions into Act 2. Begins his watering hole / training sequence, which is very common at the beginning of Act 2. You could look at Star Wars, which overly faithfully follows the formula where they go to the cantina and then Obi-Wan has him like fight with a floating ball thing. The false victory there is the battle with Darth Vader. Oh, I'm sorry, the rescuing of the princess from the Death Star. Like they think they've won because they've accomplished one objective, but the real objective is like, oh shit, the Empire is still out there. So the Death Star is still there. We got to destroy that thing. So like that's how I kind of view it here.
Okay.
But like you could view it as you could view it as a 2-act structure, in which case it'd be like Act 1 is the first half, and then Act 2 is all down. Everything rises to here and then goes down. Like it's all semantics at a certain point.
Oh, sure. And I just figured that because this is your space, and I've been doing a lot of jabber jawing, that I would just try to throw in something that definitely fits into your realm. Mm-hmm. But as I was attempting to segue, speaking of Star Wars, how about Gundam Wing?
Yes. One of my favorite episodes in the series. I'll get into the specifics as to why and the way we go. But yeah, Bob, what was your, it's been a bit for you, but what was your kind of takeaway from this episode?
So for my episode here, or for my take on this episode, I would say one of the big things for me, was that Nicole is just the worst in this, and it's the first time in a while that I've been like, oh, there might be something redeemable about Un, and Nicole is just the actualization of who she could have been had she not had this mental transition, right? She definitely is not fully absolved of some of the things that she has done as far as my book is concerned, but seeing something that we hear talked about throughout the episode, a soldier doesn't think they just get results. And to see that Nicole is this individual that believes so fervently without question what he believes Un is trying to aim toward, that he is willing to even sacrifice Un for the sake of the cause because he believes the cause is the thing that goes over all, without questioning why the cause is even a thing to begin with. That is probably one of the best ways I've seen war handled in a way that shows both the belief structure, but also how that belief structure can be flawed.
Yes.
I thought that was solid, but I also wanted to choke the bastard every second I saw him on screen. To that end, I also think of this duality of Un. And I mentioned, I think, a while back, before the reveal concretely on this episode, the idea that 11 is a mirroring of the number 1. And so to see this individual having a two mind, two perspective handle on the situation, whether it was with intent or not, I like that from a thematic, a motifing point of view. I think that the glasses are definitely her transformation device. she can be in the entire rest of the outfit, but it's not until glasses reach bridge of nose that we know that we have our militaristic Un instead of our peacekeeping Un, is how I think I'm going to try and define them from here on out. Yeah, not that she is a peacemaker, but a peacekeeper.
Yeah, I think you can do that if you want. You kind of limit kind of what she's sort of going between by doing that. She also has a moment that's sort of a fan favorite moment. It gets good reactions when I show it to people every time it happens. When Zex pulls her out of the blast and she's been like buffeted around, she's like, and then all of a sudden she's like, bring me to Barge. And everybody's like, yeah, fuck that guy. Yeah. Like, so like she doesn't have the glasses on there, but yeah, she seems to have figured something out. Trey seems to be lamenting that she was once too far in one direction, has now gone too far in the other direction. So there's some room for Un to still kind of move about and figure out what she wants the future to be, what space should be, what Trey's is going for, things like that.
I wanted her to shoot Nicole so badly. She had her gun out. Yeah. I was waiting. I was so excited. And no, apparently we're not going to shoot this man because we're going to have some level of redemption for this individual who used to shoot first and ask questions later in the name of her beloved Trace.
Yep, there's a little bit of a growth for her there. There's sort of a following of military decorum there as well, as guards are kind of pushing Nicole off to prison for use later on. Mm-hmm.
What else? It was interesting to see. Again, from a design perspective, the suit that we see our Miliardo piece.
If I could have a suit like that, I would look so dapper.
I'll tell you what, Skeyhill.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this on air for everybody right now.
Yeah.
For those of you listening at home, aid us in some financial means, and we will go ahead and be sure to use that money towards a specific cosplay each. We will have Skeyhill dressed in that suit, and I will be in a full Neo Japan bodysuit.
Well, I think if I were cosplaying, I'd want like the Trey's outfit, but like as a suit, like for me to go around to like events and on directing and stuff. Like I would want to look like an actual tailored suit. Like from Italy, of that, because that is a fine looking suit. I love it.
As far as the rest of the episode is concerned, it feels like it's mostly an Un and Peacecraft episode. We do see a little bit of Troa, but it seems like it's more focused on Nicole espousing the ideals that he believes Un holds. So I wouldn't really count it as a Troa moment, even though we see that Troa is right the entire time. He is, in effect, so much better a soldier than Nicole seems to be.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm forgetting an individual somewhere in here. What other characters might have had bigger moments?
Well, so like you really saw it follow three people, and one's sort of dealing with this kind of split personality, and meanwhile Trey's and Zex both remarking about how they both lament how they have no power to affect anything anymore. You even get an interesting scene, and it's like it's sort of a very easy idea. You could call it lazy if you want, except for the fact that most people don't even put in this kind of effort, as easy as it is, where when he's talking to Un, and Un's like, no, you got to come, we're setting up the world so that you can kind of take it over away from Romerfeller. And he's like, no, that's not what the point was. That I'm not interested in the history of one individual. And then he says, even if I wanted to do that, lady, and I have no power. And as he says that line, we actually have the light coming through his window onto him at the computer that gives these sort of noir prison bar kind of effects. Easy to do. Been doing it for 60 years, at this point. But like no one takes the time, and it's just sort of another instance where they're like working really hard on directing his scenes because what they're doing with him is something very unusual. We have essentially the person we thought was our antagonist at the beginning, like having his own crisis of conscience and having his own little hero's journey and being like, shit, I can't do anything. Like, I'm powerless here. I just have to step back and let the real people, Zex and the Gundam pilots do what they're doing because they're doing it way better than I wanted to do it. And Ewan's just like, well, remember when you set off this whole global thing and now everything's in chaos? You got to come clean it up. And he's like, but I can't anymore. Romerfeller took it all over. Like, I got nothing. And like that's going to be his kind of journey. And Zex is meanwhile trying to find life outside of being a soldier and has no idea how to do that either. So both of these individuals want to affect change in more positive ways, but have no idea how to do it. And Un is thinks she knows how to do it. She thought she knew how to do it at the beginning of the show. That didn't work. She tried this way. That didn't work. And so like the title of Fight for Independence is interesting because nobody's real independence, the way we think of it, is kind of at stake here. It's really sort of these people all being crushed down by the structures imposed on them by the earlier parts of the show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I feel like I'm glad that you told me what was happening with the Noir setup with the lighting there, because I think it was more subtle than you might see it now, having watched it 8 or 9 times.
Yeah, could be.
It's one of those things where if I were to watch it a second, third, or fourth time, I would probably catch it, but just one time through, I would have still been missing it, and that may be intentional, that it's supposed to be that subtle.
It's all there in the background if you can kind of find these clues that they've hidden in there for you. So yeah.
Is there a clue that you could reveal of the past that we may have missed during our earlier discussions?
No, because like I've been sort of keying you into kind of like these directed scenes, and so like that's why I bring up sort of like him releasing the birds in the bird cage and they come back, and him not shooting the fake targets but shooting the bird, and you noticed the sort of the baby walking towards the pier and he keeps the mother away. Like these are all sort of small things there. He has more large ones, like in the previous episode where he's just like, hey, Romafella, your mobile dolls suck. And he's just like shooting them down in a Leo. In this episode, he has to be more restrained because he's sort of directly in front of Duke Dermail outside of even a faux battlefield. So he's sort of saying things that don't make a lot of sense considering other things he said in private. But then when he is in private again, you're like, okay, like he has to sort of play this role. Like that's how he's kind of being caged.
He wants to be a more neutral, direct party, but has to play this. I don't want to say double agent because it's not like he's working with the opposing side, but at this point, I don't even know how many sides there are.
Yeah.
One thing that did come back to me while you were talking about your people being stuck and how Trace is stuck with the Romefeller situation, it reminded me that there is that major engineer, that chief engineer that saves our buddy Wu Fei.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the most sinister moment that I've seen Wu Fei have yet. He seems like a villain when he says, well, thanks. I know that you need upgrades, Nataku, and it seems that we're going here. I can't believe how helpful and hospitable they're being.
Yep.
It has this unnerving vibe to it. Even if he's not mwahahaing, it feels like it.
Yeah, it's a little bit, last episode, Katra has his waha moment where he kind of laughs crazily. And now, Wu Fei's having a similar moment, as he's sort of was floating around in space, unable to do anything. And sort of had to kind of do this gambit where like, well, they could kill me, but they would probably do that anyway. But if they do bring me in, now we can make a plan happen here. And another character is going to have a similar plan next week's episode. So you're going to see some of that as we move towards our halfway point.
Cool. Were there any other points that you wanted to talk about in Wing before we go the way we go?
Yeah, so another interesting thing is sort of, you may remember Septim is the guy who was very much in the Alliance, not wanting to go with peace like the Field Marshal Noventa was. And so Trey's then has him declare war on the Gundams.
I'm just remembering I apologize. I do have to interrupt.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Okay.
The grandfather and the grandson, who are both part of the higher echelons in that particular space station that was about to be blown away.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They are incredibly nuanced but lovely performances.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this old man who is apologizing to his grandson, and a grown man, but a grandson nonetheless, for setting up this situation that was going to lead an entire portion of the world, as far as I'm concerned, to its own end because soldiers be what soldiers do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we get to see more of Septim's family here. We may have forgotten about him for a bit, and it's sort of interesting like it kind of even adds more to, like it lets you look back on Septim and be like, why was he like that? You know, what exactly was going on? Why did he think war still needed to happen? What was he afraid of? Because these people, I don't know, they seem much nicer. They seem more reasonable. And it's, I don't know, you could just be like intergenerational thing or like something happened, but like maybe there's more to Septim than we got to see in like the 5 minutes he was on air. And it kind of makes you have to reevaluate what that family dynamic might have been. Like it's just, you're always reevaluating in the show, which I find to be useful.
Certainly. And honestly, from a friendship perspective, this is starting to show a lot of you to me as far as your desire to definitely be as factual and open-minded as you are with many viewpoints. I know that myself, I am a self-ascribed liberal, or what would be the term that I would try to use here? I am a socialist individual, and I will admit, you know, we say that we're open, but oftentimes we are just as foolhardy when it comes to speaking on what we speak on without really considering the mental state of people that might oppose our view. And we get confused and frustrated with that inability to see what we feel is just a correct answer. But you, while I may not always agree with you on some points, always seem to be willing to hear perspective before making decision, and I do admire that about you.
So yeah, not too much here. Like even with Trey's, like you assume when the show begins that he's causing war to kind of try to take it over, and so like Un's here being like, take over the world. And he's like, no, that's not the goal. And like, we're just sort of going in this very odd place where you couldn't have imagined it going, and your expectations are diverted. And now we're like, okay, well, how does Tubarov and Duke Dermail play into this now? They look and act way more aristocratic. They're old, rich white guys. Like maybe that's sort of where we target next.
I hope so.
But
again, we're touching base in my territory now.
Yeah. So, there's a lot to kind of change and pivot. And, as we get to the end of the show, we'll kind of take a little tour back and see kind of where everything went. And just feel like the weight of time has sort of passed. So yeah, very good episode. So in the way we go, why I like this episode so much? Because in this episode, we spend maybe 3 minutes with the 5 title characters, maybe 3 minutes. And other than that, we're with background. We're like secondary characters, and they've all been antagonists for most of their duration in the show. I love that the show can do that. I was watching, I was lamenting, like, why don't more shows do this? And then you remember, oh, yes, because you're paying these stars all this money. If you then went to your executive producer with a show and be like, hey, look, we have an episode where our main character isn't really in it much. We're going to look at these characters. They'd be like, what are you, insane? We're paying that guy $500,000 an episode. We're not going to make him work for it? No, that's ridiculous. And then you thought, like, well, maybe they could get away with it here because it's a cartoon thing. But even, for The Simpsons that has like 80 million characters in its world, they can't even do it because they have the same issue where their voice actors command so much money now. Their main family voice actors command so much money. You also have to make sure you put them in every episode, to the point where otherwise very interesting episodes get a little detoured or distracted by trying to shoehorn 1 or 2 Simpsons family members into a story with Flanders or a story with Smithers or stories with Comic Book Guy, where you're kind of doing an interesting probing of their background and motivations. Like, it's sort of a fault we have with the star system. I have a lot of problems with the star system, but last night it sort of hit me with like, shit. Like, now we're limiting the ways that we can tell stories, especially in these ensemble pieces, because of that. Like, that just seems so unfortunate. But it's just so refreshing to spend it. Not only were there so few of the main pilots in it, there was barely any Gundam battling in it. It was all just like stuff happening on the ground. I love it. Love this episode. One of my favorites. Glad we finally got to it.
This is the thing where we watch the show, we talk about the show, and something comes up in our minds that is related but off base of the show, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Listeners, it has taken me the better part of at least a third, if not half, the series to finally define in my head what this segment is supposed to be. Just so you know.
Okay.
But yes, so my way we go is cosplay we were just talking about, it reminded me of something that I feel is brilliant. I don't think I've seen, and I would love to try and eventually emulate.
Okay, what is it?
Or if not, hopefully convince a more capable cosplayer into doing. A dual cosplay where you play one of these less ostentatious style suits, similar to your one for Miliardo Peacecraft, mine for Domonkashu.
Yeah.
But because these are such low bulk suits, you can go and also build a shell that would look like a Gundam. So that way you could effectively be walking around in a Gundam cosplay. People enjoy that. And then come out of the shell, close it back up, and stand next to it. You now have a 2 cosplay system there.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that. Sounds very complicated.
It is very complicated, but there are plenty of people that are more capable of doing that level of articulation in terms of their suit setups and the like. There are plenty of videos that you'll find online of like adults who will make kid-sized Transformer costumes where they can actually transform, things like that.
Oh,
it requires a little bit of engineering know-how, but you could do it with something like that. I think this would actually be easier because it's just you have to find a way to take off a portion, but then have like a support system inside that allows you to still move it without having to like overly restrap everything. You know?
Okay, well, that could be fun.
You know, so if I don't do that sometime, maybe I can convince one of my cosplay friends or somebody to see if it seems feasible.
Yeah. Well, but, we'll keep you updated on that, listeners.
Yeah. It will not happen.
Oh, man.
So now that we've done that whole shenaniganery, I feel like we've been walking around for a bit. Do we want to go sit down in the nerd corner?
I think we need to take a seat, you know. So what I have today is, this is sort of brought to my attention talking to some producer friends of mine. There's like a new, like a streaming service called Argo, and it's more like Vimeo than like Netflix. But it's specifically curated to like short films that are selected by, I guess, the staff here. So sort of like the Vimeo staff picks, but there's none of the other stuff to filter through. It's only this, where it's sort of like kind of great short films from around the world that maybe aren't getting sort of the attention that they think they deserve, or that need to be seen, can kind of come here. You can submit to them if you are a filmmaker as well. You know, a lot of producers kind of hang around on the site looking for like projects to kind of pick out, or like marketing their own projects, trying to drum up interest. So if you're out there looking for some interesting short film content, at the moment it's very new, maybe about a couple months old, mostly has documentaries up, but there were some interesting short films from maybe like Germany, I think Germany that I saw that were sort of interesting, and a little out there. So if you want to check it out, Argo, it's not argo.com because that was taken. It's another link. I don't remember at the top of my head, but I will put that in the show notes for you. Bob, what did you find this week?
Again, before we walk away, I just want to ask, so would another way to put it be like it is a high-end version of YouTube where it's not quite a service that you are paying for like millions and millions of dollars worth of production value, but you're also not paying for like shittier YouTube Red series or something like that?
Well, no, you don't have to pay for anything. You can just hang out there. Yeah, like Vimeo just feels like other YouTube to me. Green YouTube to me. This is just like, it's a way to like not get lost amongst the clutter if you're a short film maker or looking for short film. And there's the goal, I think, is to have these selections have a little more prestige to them too. So when you're coming here, you're not getting sort of run-of-the-mill generic kind of short films. You're getting ones that they think have played very well, that they think are kind of well made, and doing something sort of a little different or unusual, or speaking with a very unique voice that they kind of want to get out there for other people to see and maybe for producers to stumble upon.
And would you say that some documentaries might fit that if they were more of a niche culture or something to that effect?
Yep, there's that, but some of them also are kind of done in like a fashion you wouldn't normally assume with documentary, or kind of doing some like are adding kind of animation things. Some are kind of playing with the idea that you trust documentaries. Like, yeah, they're sort of, the documentaries kind of run the gambit. There's more of those made too. And there's easier outreach for them because their sort of target audience is kind of built into the subject matter. But yeah, certainly a lot of documentaries there right now that you could check out if you're into those. A lot of kind of wacky ways to kind of tell stories in that medium, but also short films are there currently, and more will be coming, I imagine, in the future months.
On my end, in the nerd corner here, I will say that my wife has pulled me into a Netflix series. It's a short series. Typically, my wife and I have similar but opposing flavors. And I am genuinely astounded how much I appreciate The Queen's Gambit.
Oh, yes, I'm familiar with this show. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I only discovered it through my wife recently. And we are 4 episodes into this 7-part series. The acting is lovely. The production values are amazing. The cinematography is solid. I love seeing the way they handle things like framing and their choices in score and soundtrack, and the costuming is lovely, especially since it's my wife's aesthetic of mid-60s, mid-century modern decor, things like that. Mm-hmm. But they also employ some filming techniques that, whether or not they're just being emulated, still feel correct. There is a shot that is done in, I want to say, the third or fourth episode, where they do that distance shot where you have someone heavily in the foreground, and then further away off to the other side of the camera is someone in the distance, but they're both seemingly equal in terms of focus.
Yeah, we would call that deep focus.
Deep focus, thank you. Mm-hmm. I remember I've heard the term recently, but things like that, being able to take these different visual aspects that don't necessarily come to mind right away, but are applied very well. And then to see this like very sad but intriguing story of a woman going through her life and just all the pain she's going through, while also having this wonderful handle on a often I feel underrated game that I am ass at, which is chess, and to see the intricacies that they apply it. I would be lax to also note that it does give me the same feeling as when I have seen, and I know Scale has joined me, people playing Magic the Gathering at conventions and the like. It does evoke a similar feeling for those individuals. So if you've ever been a children's card game player, or are in fact a fan of chess, the 60s, sad stories, or Sylvia Plath, as my wife also brought up during the course of this, I highly recommend that you see The Queen's Gambit.
All right, yep, it's on Netflix, so if you have a subscription, it's like technically free, though you do pay for.
Yeah, well, I mean, and also to note about that, my wife just noted that apparently they're hiking the prices up again.
Correct.
On Netflix. I think they're up to $13 or $14 now.
Yeah, I don't know. I pay a little extra because I get the DVDs still.
Yeah, we don't do the DVDs. We just do the streaming, and I let my like most of you out there, listeners who are probably listening to this, and it's not a secret at this point. I think even Netflix acknowledges it. We're all letting at least one family member or friend or even an ex use our accounts so they don't have to pay for it monthly. And we all do it with at least one of our services. We do that with a friend who has Hulu, so we don't have to pay for Hulu, so on and so forth. Just if you don't have an account, borrow somebody else's or convince them to sit down and watch this 7-part, maybe 40, 50-minute episode series. Well worth your time.
Yes. A few years ago, they did sort of acknowledge it by letting you make profiles so other people wouldn't screw up your algorithm, but they're starting to crack down. They're trying to find a way to crack down on it more because their production budgets have gotten out of hand and their acquisition budgets are skyrocketing. So, well,
if they stop canceling things that were winning them awards like the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, then maybe we wouldn't have this problem, Netflix.
Well, it seems that the awards, like they didn't help them bring in new viewers, so there was no need to.
Well, literally the day after they got the award, that was very much lauded by critics and viewers alike, a series that was guaranteed to get awards. It was like, oh, but we want to put more of this show on, and no, we're not going to put the effort into this one. Bye.
Well,
they do that with so many creative shows and series that they choose to just not put into. It was the same thing with Sense8 a few years ago. It was a great queer fantasy, modern fantasy series that they just dropped during the second season, I think, and then they tried to wrap it up with a movie, which I guess did okay, but was still leaving a bitter taste in everybody's mouth because it was not the same as just letting the damn story be told.
Well, Bob, here's the problem. As
no one cares, I know.
As these places get bigger. Well, like some people care about these shows, but not enough. And that's as a person who's been in love with many, many niche shows canceled before their prime, you just sort of like, this is how big business works. Netflix was
I'm going to do a Bob rant.
Oh, okay.
Bob rant. Bob rant. Bob's gonna yell stuff. He's gonna act up because it's a Bob rant.
This isn't even about Netflix. This is about my love for food and how every time I find a food that is amazing, it is inevitably discontinued. Okay, you know it, and I know it because at the very least, you and I shared a wonderful candy during our 1 year of high school together called Twizzler Twerps. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. They were delicious. They were a different kind of strawberry for Twizzler, which made it more palatable for me, and orange. And they had like Starburst style taffy, but softer inside. They were amazing. And they have tried to do like sort of touch base versions of it where they do the sour and sweet or the rainbow line or something. And they're all ass comparatively speaking. They could have just kept it up, but no, it's not making enough sales, even though they keep coming back to the well. Same thing with Snickers Crunchers, same thing with M&M Crispies and Pretzel and all this other stuff. We have 1892, a amazing variation, admittedly a hipster variation, but an amazing variation on the Pepsi Cola line where you had a cola and a ginger cola made with real cola nut and everything else. Delicious. A little overpriced, but you're paying for quality. Problem is you're trying to sell it in convenience stores. You're trying to sell it in supermarkets. Nobody who goes there is going to pay the extra money when they can get the cheaper version with less put into it because all they want is the caffeine. You don't want to throw these things away just because of margins. You have to think of it as either a premium product and sell it elsewhere or in a different venue, or you have to at least acknowledge that your devoted base is going to be pissed when you get rid of the thing. And so, like, maybe make it a seasonal thing. Maybe make it okay, this month is the month where you get your Pepsi Blue back, and just let us have that. I didn't like Pepsi Blue. It tasted like ass because it was just blue raspberry cola. But even still, why would you get rid of these things? These are things that are making you money. I'm sure that they're probably not making enough money compared to your base product, and you know it. So why did you even put out the product in the first damn place if you weren't going to try and keep it out there?
All right. Well, there was a Bob rant for you. Part of my story was just that the days of, BoJack Horseman and Orange is the New Black are gone, and now it's going to be all Stranger Things, right? They've entered the blockbuster phase of their life cycle. And
so when do they enter the end of blockbuster phase of their life cycle?
Oh, when the end of the blockbuster phase, sadly, is when they go bankrupt. That's sort of the hole they're in now.
My joke was too subtle. I was referring to Blockbuster Video.
Oh, I see.
Yes, the very group that Netflix helped to destroy. When will they go the way of Blockbuster? When do you think we will get to see something like that occur?
I think it would have to take. I mean, the pessimist would be like, it's probably going to go on for a long time. They're probably now the Disney of internet streaming. Although I guess Disney's there now too. But like, they're just going to be around forever. And they're just going to be like the generic streaming service. And everybody else is going to have a personality to stand aside from them. But to be fair, I have no idea how the cash flow system works. I have no idea. I don't know what numbers they're trying to look at when they're making these shows, like how many new subscriptions it has to keep, how many subscriptions it has to retain. I just don't know where their money's coming from. So, it could be sooner than that because everything's too top heavy or it's not sustainable. They didn't figure it out beforehand before they rushed into it. It feels very top heavy,
especially where I used to work at Hot Topic last year, and they kept trying to push a lot of merch, and that merch did not sell as much as they would have liked for being a full price thing. A lot of it ended up being on the sales rack by the end,
Yeah, it's the problem with like the binging the style that they have, where like for 3 months or 2 months, maybe it's even less, like everybody cares about Stranger Things. But then like, I don't know, almost a year goes by, maybe a year, maybe a little more, and like you've moved on to the other thing. So like it's harder to kind of build those deep roots and that loyal fan base by not having it come out every week for several months, because then it's sort of more part of your life more often.
Yeah, well, just to touch base again on the Queen's Gambit before we go to our final plugs, one of the issues that I see here is that on the one hand, we're getting wonderful stories that are being told. And if we are willing to invest our time into it, we can literally sit through what's effectively a 7 or 8 hour movie and just let ourselves consume what is a visual book. But if we do that, then we are often at a loss for what to watch next, because if we are consuming in the way that Netflix wants us to consume, we'll eventually just be treating it like what it is, on demand, what used to be a pseudo premium service for cable companies before cable has inevitably become obsolete.
Yeah, Netflix has to do some refining as it's sort of setting the trend for this. But I think overall they'll be able to recover. They have so much cash flow coming in from their investors. That's part of why they can't do things like Dark Crystal so much anymore. They have to keep those people happy. But, you know, if you want to agree, disagree, or have your own particular rant, you can email us at zakutalkcast@gmail.com.
And I will actually offer something on top of that,
Yeah,
Scale.
what are you going to do?
If you can send out some kind of a rant that you think is viable, and I or skeyhill thinks it is particularly well-written, witty, or otherwise just absurd, I am more than willing to read it on air just as a goof, because if you have made me chuckle or think sincerely on it, I will gladly read it. And skeyhill, I feel like you're the kind of person that would do something similar.
Yeah, why not, right? You don't even have to, not even a Patreon reward. We just have to like it. Send it on our way. We'll be happy to give it a perusal. The email, of course, set up by the wonderful Lev Van Rensselaer, currently minding our audio boards. So thanks to him, and thanks to my co-host this season, Bob Skerry, for joining us. Bob, you got any plugs this week?
I certainly do. Besides the ones that I did at the beginning of this, let me go down the list once more. Hey, hi, Worldwide Sensei. This is Bob Skerry VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk headquarters. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, as opposed to Twitter, the Bluebird thing. You can find me on Twitter, where it's a twins-only dating site. I have no twins, so I don't really get any hits, but, you know, you do what you can. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other sites by my handle. You can also go to bobskerryvoa.com and be able to listen to my various demos, of which I am still in the process of reformulating. But that's where you can also find a way to hire me. Please let me be a voice for you, whether that's for your commercials, your narrations, your character work ideally, or anything else. And it can be big or small. Just let me work for you. You can certainly listen to this podcast. You can find it on my link tree. Just use my handle. It should be in your brains by now. And you can also pick up the games that I am now partaking in building. You can either go to bobskerryvoa.itch.io. In this case, there's only the one game out, but there should be more in time. You can also go to my friend's Librarian PC. Just spell it librarian, add PC. .itch.io, and you'll be able to find the SRD niche, which I helped to co-dev, and you can use that as the basis for your own source book like I made. So it's part of the Creative Commons. You are more than welcome to use it. Just, you know, acknowledge us, do as it says in the first few pages, and hopefully you'll have a wonderful time playing a D6 system that lets you actually enjoy a story creation process instead of just rolling dice and doing arithmetic.
Twitter could be a good way to find like a long lost twin, or to see if you have one, you know?
Yeah, but then that gets really awkward when like you see that the website in question here has been developed to talk about your kinks. And if you share that with like your lost fraternal sibling, that's going to be weird, especially if you both have the same kink.
That's bonding.
And you found each other that way. It gets really weird. Let's get away from this absurd concept that I fed us and talk about your plug, Skeyhill.
All right. Well, I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, video essays, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com, including and on social media with a similar-sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience, what would you do if you found your long-lost twin?
I would thank them, I would apologize to them, and I would invite them to fight the rest of the twins on Twitter.
Just one